This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so I will read our notice. So pursuant to Governor Cuomo's recent executive orders and due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Village Hall is closed and we are meeting, the planning board that is tonight is meeting via video conference. So with that said, there is a notice posted on the village website that contains a link for the public to join in such a meeting should they be interested in observing our discussions or participating. So with that said, I will make a motion to open our meeting.
Second.
How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let the record show all 5 members of the planning board are present and all voted in favor of opening the meeting. Okay, so it is 6 o'clock on July 20th, and this is going to be a workshop session for the entire meeting. We don't have any applications, nor am I aware of any pending. So our sole topic for the night was continuing our discussion over the active transportation plan. Let me give you guys a couple updates since everyone's here. I attended the last trustees meeting this week, and there's 2 things of note. One, they formally adopted a resolution to refer the active transportation plan to us to look at. And it looked like that included secret documents and it included the so-called coastal assessment form. So that seems to be properly handled. I don't know when we want to schedule a public hearing for that. I think it makes sense to keep discussing it first and then we'll schedule a public hearing, but we do need to schedule that, I think about a month in advance or something like that. So maybe sometime in August.
Do we want to simply put it on the calendar tonight?
We can certainly do that. Do you want to just add it to our agenda for a regular August meeting? Does that seem reasonable for everybody?
Sure.
Yes.
It does to me. I don't think we need a separate meeting for it.
No, it makes sense to have it on a regular meeting. All right. So, all right, we'll do that then. We'll schedule it for that meeting. We'll let Linda know and Dorothea. I'll have to check and see when that is. Let's see, when is our August meeting scheduled? Oh, we don't have any meetings listed after tonight. So it's August 17th. Linda.
Linda?
Hi, Linda.
So we were just discussing this LWRP review of with the trustees. So we're going to have the public hearing at our regular August meeting on the 17th. Linda, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear. Did you
Okay.
ask me something?
No, so the comment was we're just discussing this LWRP review of the active transportation plan since the trustees forwarded it to us. And we'll schedule a public hearing at our August meeting, which is August 17th.
Here's my issue. According to Dorothea and Steve, it has to go to Monroe County and it won't be ready by August.
It won't be ready?
Because the 30 days, it hasn't even gone yet to Monroe County, so I don't know if we'd be able to do this.
We don't need to vote. We just can't vote until we hear back from them. We can certainly have the public hearing.
Okay, so the 17th, our next meeting.
Correct. And
Okay.
my guess is we may be scheduling, if we're, depending on how far we get tonight, we may want to keep scheduling some other meetings on Mondays, and we'll apprise you of that.
Okay, thank you.
So other updates from the trustee meeting, by the way, is they adopted a resolution to declare a park in the northwest quadrant. So I think they left about 2 acres behind for the DPW. 2 or 2.5 acres has been removed, but the rest of that area was officially designated as intending to be a park. And when they adopt a resolution to do that, it makes it really difficult to undo it. So that's a good thing. So whoever comes along and government and X years from now doesn't say, hey, we can just sell this land or make this something else. So it should permanently protect it, was the thought. And we're all supportive of that. So that the trustees seem to have commenced that. And I think that's a very good thing. Okay, so that said, does anyone else have any comments or questions? Otherwise, I was going to say, let's just get back to where we left off in the document.
I just have one housekeeping request. The page numbers on my printout got cut off. So if you could just refer to what the top of the page looks like, so I'm on the right page.
Okay, and there's a new draft of this out. I'm still going off my printed copy, which was the January 2019 version.
Dark enough either.
And actually, I guess what was forwarded to us is just a new supplement. So I
Right.
think the document is the same, but there's a supplementary document, which is modifications they're considering.
That was my understanding. I received a text from Renee before this meeting too, who said that she wouldn't be able to attend, but we could text her if we had any questions during the meeting.
Okay, well, we'll get back. I'm sure we'll have a time where we'll want to engage with them. So we'll keep jotting down our notes and so on.
Sure, it's showing.
Not again.
No, it's
Okay, so where we left off was the bicycle boulevard section. I believe we're on page 81, which was the section on the traffic calming plan, right under traffic calming strategies. And this next section is bicycle network.
Okay, thanks.
Did you find that, Susan?
Yep, I'm good.
So I think some of the last things we were talking about prior to getting into this is we were talking about the problem of getting onto streets. So Joanne, I was shocked to hear that Joanne has to go all the way down to South Street from Lincoln so that she can make a left turn onto Monroe. And I think some of the comments that are taken away, we're kind of wondering if there are some things we could do with the timing of the walk signals and so on to increase more gaps in traffic. So it's easier for pedestrians to actually cross Monroe Ave and other streets. Dave Marshall gave us some commentary last time about some of your bicycle escapades in town. And I remember in particular, Dave, you had expressed concerns about the safety of bike lanes and riding on sidewalks and stuff like that. And your commentary is you found it best just to ride right down the middle of the driving lane.
That is correct.
Do you have any other comments on bikeability observations you and your family have made?
I suppose the only addition would be the only way that bike lanes are going to be safe, in my view, is if they're so prevalent that they're used. Because if they're not used that frequently, people are just simply going to forget about them. And so the network of transportation has to be compelling to get off the sidewalks. And And so that means I think it has to be pretty pervasive across most of our streets, if possible, or at least the main thoroughfares, and you don't want to give anything up to accomplish that. And really well marked. However, we can do that in ways that don't light up our roadways with additional signage any more than we already have in order for pedestrian safety. I know a lot of us might have seen the crosswalk signs as a pretty stark reminder that we have pedestrians in the community, which is good. But is there a way to do it in a way that's noticeable and prevalent, but also not so loud and obnoxious? Maybe is another key. And I don't know how to do that other than trying to create maybe color differentials in the roadways, maybe maybe some lighting on the roads, if we can do that on the main thoroughfares that kind of shine and light up. But I don't know, I thought the village part of this seemed to be a little bit more comprehensive in nature than the towns. And so to that end, anything is better than nothing, just to get more people out on the roads. But again, I think our hurdle, the biggest hurdle that they have, is to get people off the sidewalks. And aside from your primary, like, bikers bike often a lot, your average family right now, I think, is going to stick to the sidewalk, potentially even with this plan. I don't know.
Yeah, a concern of mine is with a lot of the bike lanes I see on the roads is they just do not look safe, particularly, as you say, for family travel. And they're usually not, the reason why is not large enough.
Yeah, so single lane. I agree. Single lane transportation with the family, I'm not going to do. And so if the width is only enough for one bike, then I'm going to take over the road, even if there is a bike lane, because I need to ride to where my daughter is on my inside to the streets, to the sidewalk side, right? And so I'm always going to be riding between her and whatever traffic could be coming in the other direction, enough to be bigger, more prevalent, or more present. And if the bike lanes are too narrow to allow me to ride next to her, then I will definitely choose to continue to just ride in the roads, like as a vehicle.
So I work out in Henrietta, and I watched them put in bike lanes along the roads there. And like West Henrietta and East Henrietta Road, or East Henrietta in particular, and Jefferson Road, I think they put about a 2-foot to 3-foot wide bike lane on a street with 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, and nobody ever rides a bike on them. It's nuts. So I don't. Unfortunately, the streets aren't wide enough to actually put in a wide bike lane. So I'm not really sure what the solution here is, but. I mean, we could talk about these bicycle boulevards, but unless they can get these wide enough so that they're actually safe for families, as you suggest, I don't know. I don't know what the point of putting them in if they're not, can't be used and they're dangerous.
If it's just me on the road, I'm fine, right? Using the bike lanes if they're there. I think it's nice to allow for cars to pass me at a faster speed. But if it's a family, I'm probably going to take over more of the road and still slow down the transportation. But, if you're talking high school kids or, college age kids, I think there's a lot of utility to still having just single file lanes, but it may not fully accomplish the goal of, getting families to use them. Maybe they still stay to the sidewalks.
I think that makes sense as well. In the few cases I've gone down to Pittsford Dairy on my bike, my bicycle, not the motorcycle, I'll ride on the road, and it would be nice to have a lane there. It's a little bit intimidating. I do it anyway, but it's intimidating to be on the road without a specific bike lane.
Yeah, no, I think having a marked bike lane that's a different color that's still useful for adults or older kids makes some sense. But if my children were riding alone up until the age of maybe like 14 or 15, I don't know if I'm going to suggest to go out on the bike lane. That being said, I think it's still incredibly valuable to have bike lanes for especially the colleges coming in and just the older adults in the community in the village, and people coming into the village. If I'm outside of it, I think it's nice. So
We do have several people who commute to work, especially at U of R from the village as well. And I think, I've seen them on the roads. So I think they would appreciate those lanes too.
yeah,
Well, the U of R is nice from the village. So you can take the canal the whole way there.
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Justin?
Yes.
So one thing the LWRP suggested is a parking master plan. And I think if that were, kind of part of this ATP, then maybe some parking, especially on South and North Main Street, where, there's really a lot of shared real estate. If we sacrifice some parking, I think then there would be plenty of room for a real, something that could be called a bike boulevard. But I think a real comprehensive, a parking master plan, with some changes to the library space, and maybe, thinking about shared business spaces. I think that would, I hope that occurs in the future.
Okay, so your comment basically is back to a comment you made in a previous meeting where a lot of space is given to cars on Main Street. People don't want to go down Main Street, mostly go down the sidewalks because it's not safe to go down Main Street. So your thought is maybe if we find some alternative parking configurations, maybe some of those parking spots could be removed and converted to a bike lane, and then that would be a very wide and valuable way to commute.
Yeah, thanks. Sounds better.
I don't remember who it was, but I believe somebody on the village board had at one point referenced that by having parking on the street, it acts as a traffic calming device. Does anybody else remember that?
Right. Yeah, but and there are other traffic calming structures, and like maybe a little curb or something, but between the roadway and the bike lane, that I think the ATP is also a little light on. So I think by relying on parking for traffic calming, I get it, but I think that's not. I think there's still an underlying problem. Number one, for village parking. Number two, for coexistence with a viable bike lane.
I tend to agree with that. If you can steal the parking back, you can steal the roadways for bikes, and then you can insert curb cuts and other various things that could replace the parking value relative to speed control.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, there are things, like planters and, different structures that would, kind of enhance, a village, pedestrian and bike friendly aesthetic.
Mhm.
And, people can, walk, 10 feet
Right.
to park. But that's my old sawhorse. Yeah.
I agree that would be nice too. I can't remember if it was something in the ETP now or if it was from the webinar on traffic calming and connectivity, where they mentioned if you did have to keep the parking, using the parking as the buffer. So have it go road and then parking and then the bike lane. So to use that to protect the pedestrians, the bikers.
Well,
Yeah,
they
as
do-
long as you don't worry about car doors.
Yeah, that's where if you did the
That's
diagonal
maybe-
parking. So right now, especially on the beginning of South Main, you have parallel parking on both sides. And what if you stripped some of that away, did diagonal parking on one side, and then had a bike lane on the other, or something to that effect, where you could steal some of that space back. But again, the big thing here is I think the four corners there has a unique appeal to trying to do things like curb cuts, right? And maybe there's some parking element to that, but I think the bigger challenge is how do you get the aggregate village to have enough bike lanes to feel bike friendly, not just at the four corners. What can you do through, Church Street or Lincoln or South Ave, things that are more pervasive than just the major thoroughfare or the intersections.
Well, another option could be widening sidewalks too.
I don't think I would go there, personally.
So I know I don't have a dog myself, but there's more than a few dog walkers in the village, and the dog walkers are not too happy with bicyclists riding on the sidewalk.
Right.
Well, especially if you take the definition of a bicyclist in the village code, which includes 50cc motor vehicles. Did you notice that? Sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent, but it actually allows 50cc motorbikes.
Hey.
All right. Well, we'll have to start gauging those hoverboards and the mopeds that I've seen people on.
Yeah, there's someone on my street that has a golf cart. Just driving around. Okay. So anyway, that was some good general discussion on bike lanes. I appreciate hearing everyone's thoughts, Harry. I thought we had some good ideas. Just throwing a couple other things out there again regarding safety of the bike lane and so on. And it kind of makes sense, but as either on our main roads, they're all state highways and they're all heavily trafficked. And guidance I've seen says as your vehicle speed goes up and vehicle volume go up, you want larger bike lanes, which kind of makes sense. I don't know where there's, other than a few of the ideas that were expressed about reconfiguring parking, I'm not sure where else we're going to get any extra street width from to do that. So, I mean, it looks like the ATP committee worked on bicycle boulevards as an alternative. So they were looking for low volume streets through the village and encouraging bicyclists on those, which I think is a pretty good idea. But my bigger concern is they're not all connected together. It's just a few different sections.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we take a look at some of the overall goals of the ATP, I think it just talks about this on like the first page. Back to page 1, I think. One of the goals is, hey, can we ride a bike to a school? I don't think that having a network of bicycle boulevards that are not connected, I don't see any path that's been created to get someone from a village to a school. Except maybe Sutherland Street.
I think somewhere it said that the purpose of the bike boulevards were to avoid the major intersections more than anything else.
I'm taking a look at the map of them on page 84, and it seems, for example, it seems kind of a no-brainer to connect the two ones together. Oh, there's Lincoln Avenue, there's Locust Street, and connecting them together would kind of make sense to me. Likewise, when at South Street, finding a way of connecting that to the canal would make sense as well, possibly with a wider sidewalk, or at least on a short section of road, maybe there is an option to come up with a wider bike lane. Any thoughts on that?
When
How
I'm
does a
looking at the map,
boulevard,
yeah, right.
how does the boulevard cross an intersection, a bike boulevard?
It
Yeah.
doesn't, it goes around it.
I mean, it does indicate at one point. So I'm looking at Locust and South. It seems, I guess you just stay on that side of the road, so you actually don't cross the intersection, huh? In the bike boulevard. So I guess I'm just wondering, is that the reason that they don't touch Main Street there? I mean, there's a
Well,
crosswalk.
yeah, but again, for a short section, there may be different opportunities to create a wider path that bicycles can travel down. So whether it be a wider sidewalk, whether it be getting rid of parking spots, I don't think it would be that hard to get rid of parking spots between Lincoln and Locust there. That's not very many.
Right.
While we're on the topic, I'm just looking at just a comment in the, what is that called? The amendments or whatever, where they reference taking away the right-hand turning lanes at Four Corners and adding bike boulevard type stuff in replace of the right-hand turning lane. And given that it's already right on red, that's kind of an interesting consideration. Kind of a non sequitur, but nonetheless.
So, and when we've been going through this, I just read through this supplement the other day, and maybe we can get into that separately. But I noticed there was a number of comments we had that made its way into the supplement, like put sidewalks on Jefferson Road, for example, all the way from the village to the town of Henrietta, I believe, was in there, so that you could walk from the village to Kings Bend Park, which seems like a nice addition. I think I also saw in here that the East Avenue sidewalk project is going to have sidewalks going all the way. It might even be done all the way from Nazareth to the Brighton town line. So the sidewalk system now ends. So it's now connected to Brighton.
That'd be good. Going back to your map, just another comment. I did find it strange that it didn't easily connect to the canal. And you know, as when we get into the LWRP, one of the things I'll talk about is, you know, connectivity to the waterways.
Right.
And it feels like it'd be nice to have in the plan something that tries to draw us down to Shane Place or onto the canal a little easier than what we have right now. It's kind of hard to get to the north side to any of these bike lanes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Dave, this was something I mentioned in another meeting, but I talked to someone once that lives on Crestview in the town, which is over where the elementary school is. And their method of taking their family for a bicycle ride is to put their bikes in the back of their car, drive a quarter mile into the village, unload the bikes, and then go right to the canal. So
do they drive across to Shane Place and get out at like the diner or something, or where do they unload?
I didn't ask their destination, but I just thought that people that are, you know, within a quarter mile of the canal and right next to the village, feeling it's unsafe to cross Jefferson Road and go on a bike ride, that's just a problem. But we need to do that.
Yeah, no, I won't cross Jefferson Road with my family unless I'm as a car in the middle of the intersection slowing everybody down. I will not try to sit there and wait for a pedestrian sign to let me go, because if I'm doing that, there's bound to be somebody doing something stupid coming around the turn. I'd rather have them see me right in front of them and slow down.
Right.
So the basic note is we have lots of main roads in here, state highways, and they're not safe for families is the key point.
Yeah. Well, that's my one concern, and Justin, I think you kind of referenced it when you were talking about how does a bike boulevard cross a main road. And when I'm looking at 84 and I see the boulevard crossing Rand Place, that'd be boulevard number 4, I don't know what that intersection would look like as a bicyclist coming down and stopping to cross over, but there's just enough limited visibility coming around there that I almost, again, would go back and try to act like a car and sit in the middle of the intersection of Jefferson Road and cross there, then try to cross as a pedestrian, on my bike and wait for traffic to stop. I guess, again, I think this has a question of utility. The more it's used, the more likely people are going to know to stop, but it's enough non-local traffic going through there that they don't naturally know that, hey, there might be a family, walking their bikes across the road. So maybe we have to have signage, and I don't know if this is in the plan. I don't remember it being in the plan, but maybe some signage within the village perimeter that says this is a bike-friendly community, something that's sort of making people aware there might be more bicyclists than not.
Yeah, well, to your point, it only takes one jerk to cause problems on roads, and we know they're there.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, I don't know too many people that walk around the village that don't have a story of a close call with a car walking, or at least know someone that's had a close call walking. I know, my wife last year felt car missed her by like a foot. And unfortunately, the person that did that just always drives recklessly. I think that I saw a post on Nextdoor yesterday about that, and I think it was the same driver that happens to live about 4 doors down from me. But anyway. All right. But otherwise, I personally, I kind of like the idea of the bicycle boulevards getting people off the main streets, as long as we can make it so it's a viable network that you can get from one place to another. I mean, to me, that sounds like a great idea. I guess another place that could possibly improve connections, and I have to take a look at how this is done, but from the end of Sutherland Street, how do you get to the canal from there? And again, Sutherland Street has a school on it, so that we know that that intersection of Sutherland and Monroe is bad. If you're ever there in a car, I know it's Rick Schnett over there. He lives right over there. He calls it T-Bone Alley because there's supposedly there's a lot of incidents there. If you're in a car there, you're gonna wait a long time to turn from Sutherland onto Monroe, and I'm sure Joanne knows all about that.
I don't even try.
You don't even try.
Yeah.
I think that's the consensus.
Is there a proposed light there in the works? Have I heard something about that?
I thought I saw something in this plan for a suggestion for it, but what I've heard is that's a big mess down there where you have a railroad track nearby, and you don't want cars backing up onto the railroad track from the stoplight.
You can put
And
a
you
stop
put
sign.
2 stoplights. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be a way.
Yeah, that's my thought too, is put one stoplight on one side of the railroad, put the other one on the other side.
Right. DOT says they can't do it.
Is that what you heard?
Long time ago, when they were talking about it, it's been talked about for years.
Okay.
And DOT is just very obstinate. They don't want to do it for some reason. And their excuse is the railroad.
Yeah.
Well, they could have a stop sign on the other side. Just stop sign going one way and one, I don't know. I gotta believe, now does the village have any control of putting a stoplight there, or is it purely DOT?
Well, it's a state highway, so
Purely DOT.
so it's up to the state.
Okay, so you can petition them, they could eventually agree, and depending on who's in charge of the DOT, you might win, you might lose.
I think you might lose.
Okay,
I mean, I know that the trustees talk to DOT, but their goal is normally moving cars. They're not so concerned about moving people and bicycles. And a lot of them have been in DOT for, I mean, the senior people have been in there for decades, and some of them still think with old 1970s design philosophies.
yeah.
So anyway, I've always heard the DOT and the fire department are difficult to, are challenging to work with in order to get what we want for pedestrians and to meet their goals as well. So they seem to conflict a lot. No, I can't remember, and maybe one of you that rides your bicycle down that way more often than I do, can you actually ride your bike across the canal on the from Sutherland Street Point on Monroe there? I seem to recall it's a pretty narrow sidewalk there.
Yeah, it is. You can do it, and then there is a sort of a back-ended way down to the canal. I think it's like a double back. That's how I remember it, but I don't do it that often.
So it can be done, but you wouldn't do it with your kids. Is that kind of?
Yeah, it's kind of like no man's land from the one side, you know, until you get past the gas station back up to the Julian's, Sue's house.
And you know, the barrier, when you're on the bridge, the barrier cuts the sidewalk almost in half. So there's a wider sidewalk, but the barrier takes a big strip out of it. So that's unfortunate.
And then they have that giant stripe section in the middle lane that does nothing.
That does nothing, right?
Okay.
So Justin, this kind of goes back to the purpose of today's discussion a little bit, and just backtracking in terms of, you know, what are our goals as a board to try to accomplish with regards to the trustees' review of this document over the next, you know, few weeks, when because there's two things happening here, right? One, we have the later LWRP and the seeker, but now we have the opportunity to extend to them some information. But at this point, given that they've forwarded it to us, there's really no additional updates that are going to occur, even with the amendments or I mean, it's basically a fixed document in time that we're going to have to provide insight to with regards to LWP and seeker. And we can give them some additional comments back with that response, but it isn't going to change the document, because it's already been, unless they go through again with the town and go through a joint meeting and get it approved again. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we heard from Renee last week, is that they actually intend to have a joint meeting between the town and the village boards. And if we send them comments, they're actually going to go over them and they'll discuss them, and they may put them into the addendum that they've been working on.
Oh, that's right. They can put it in the addendum at the point at which they approve it together at that joint session. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Yep. Okay,
So,
good. So then,
I think it would be a good idea to, what our general comments that we were coming up with. I'm scribbling down notes on my copy here. I think it would be good, kind of like we did before with the code, to jot down some notes and thoughts that we had, forward it along to all of them, and they can discuss it, see what they think.
and then they could, because we'd try to get that to them before we get the seeker LWRP comments back to them, they could potentially work on the specificity of any updates prior to when they sit down in front of the joint meeting together to approve it. Meaning, if there's some specific comments about connectivity to the canal that we would like to see, they could work on some language and embed it and be prepared to add it to the amendments when it gets approved at the joint meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, I think, well, that looks like they've actually been making some new amendments this year. So hopefully some of the people, if they want to make some changes, they'll figure out how to get it done. And the town also has staff. So they have a planner. Their director of planning is the actual planner, and they're a full-time staff member. So if someone wants to say, hey, can you flesh this out a little bit? They may be able to ask them. Okay. They also have an engineer.
Right. So to that end, though, the improvements that we may suggest or modifications we may suggest have to be concise enough and actionable in a fairly short window of time.
So it sounds, yes, I guess I would agree that they're not going to have a lot of time for back and forth on this. So
Okay.
if we write up something and have it concise, as you say, so they can go through it, that makes sense.
Yeah. Because, so to your point, going back to key points, it would be really nice to see this plan try to incorporate a few more ways to connect the canal to the village. I think that'd be nice. And I also, just going back to biking through the town when I was talking last week, I thought a little bit more about that. It would be nice if maybe they could have some, kind of country defined trails like the blue trail or the green trail or the yellow trail that have a specific point A and point B destination path. So it might be easier to know if you're in the village, where does the bicycle spokes go, right? So a little specificity to a roadway. So if I know I'm in the village, I want to get to Henrietta through the town, a nice easy drive, follow the yellow trail, and then have that bike path be painted yellow, for example. If I want to go east to Victor or to Fairport, have it be painted blue or green. Or maybe label it somehow. I don't know exactly how to do that, but it would be nice to have a little bit more clear identification that if I'm in the village and I'm starting from point A, if I follow X, I'll get here, B, C, and D. And right now we talked a little bit about being a little disjointed, and it feels like it kind of still is, but maybe there's enough connectivity. I just wouldn't be able to follow it.
I think it's an excellent idea, the color-coded trails. I use those a lot for hiking trails. I tend to remember the colors more than I don't normally have a map with me if I'm out walking. So
Yeah.
I just know that my normal route, I take the yellow trail to the orange trail, turn right, there you go.
I think it'd be great if I was on a roadway and I knew I was going to get to Henrietta on the yellow, all through the country, right? You want to keep me off the main roads? Tell me how to get there without needing to pull out my phone. So, or the other cool thing is you could then just have a map system that says if I'm on the yellow, it's going to connect Henrietta to the YMCA, to Shane Place, to East Rochester. Okay, great. That's this simplicity of the path.
Yeah, it could be as simple as, one color for north-south paths, another color for east-west paths, whatever.
Yeah.
Someone can figure that out. I think that's an excellent suggestion. Any other comments on the bike boulevards?
I have one. When I took my driver's license test, part of the information I got was that bicyclists had a 3-foot right-of-way on the road. And I don't know if that's still, I know it's still a law, but I don't think people are learning it. I don't think people know about it. It wouldn't hurt to somehow reinforce that also in maybe Dave's trail map or a sign as they enter the town that it's a very, bicycle friendly place, and the law is there's a 3-foot right of way for a bicyclist.
Huh.
Yeah, that's a lot of space on the right. I mean, I don't, heck, if a car went past me on the road at even 30 miles an hour closer than 3 feet, it's definitely moving me just from the wind, the aerodynamics of it.
Right.
I actually browsed through some of the state laws on bicycles just to see what was in there. I was pretty amused at how little there was in there.
Mm.
So I think there's about 3 things. 1, you can't grab onto a car and get towed. 2, you can't operate a bicycle with more people than it was designed for. And then I think 3, you're supposed to ride on the shoulder of the right side of the road. I think that's about it for the for bicycle laws in New York State.
So I just looked it up on my phone. It still says there's a 3-foot right-of-way from that bicyclists have when they're on the road to a car.
So that's news to me. But also, Justin, your comment that I'm supposed to ride on the shoulder of the road, is that a requirement? If there's no shoulder, do I get to own the road? Or if there is a shoulder, do I have to use it?
When I looked at it, it looked like, I've always heard it's safer to just go right down the middle of the lane. But it looked like New York law says stay the right-hand side of the road.
Stay to the right-hand side.
Or the shoulder.
Well, if that's the
I'm
law,
not an expert. There might be other complicating factors. I was just looking at one law.
yeah. Well, heck, if that's the law, put a bike shoulder on every road, or a bike boulevard, or a bike lane. But the one thing I'd say is I think this plan is good in that it's trying to move us forward, right? And there might be some things that we want to add to it that we can improve potentially after the fact. But if we can get some bigger picture concepts in here that we might be concerned about, because it's that transformational document that you refer to 5 years from now, you want to have statements in there that maybe this plan doesn't succeed at, but if it's not stated in there, it may not be easily supported in whatever might come 5 years down the road. So that's why it would be nice to see a couple things in there that maybe are a little bit more transformational, but there isn't action items to do right away.
All right, any other comments on the bike boulevards? Okay. The next section we had was started on page 85, and that says town and village recommendations for the bicycle network. And this goes in some of the things we already talked about. They have some diagrams here for roads. And so there's been some discussion to narrow the drive aisles of the roads to make the shoulders wider. And my particular thought on this, I'm looking at this road restripe candidate where it says widen shoulders. I'm kind of thinking that what makes more sense instead of a shoulder is to actually pave it or identify it as an actual buffered bike lane. A buffered bike lane usually has like a striped 1 or 2 foot area separating it from the traffic, and then it has a wider lane on there. So like it might be a 6 foot bike lane with a 2 foot striped off area to at least visually separate it from the road. And I mean, so that would be my suggestion, to consider that kind of topography to make a At least major roads a little safer.
I like the double stripe idea in that it makes a car think, hey, I can't go in there. And I don't think we'll get the DOT to allow for any raised elevation of any sort, like a curb or that what have you. So anything on the road that doesn't want a car to go there would be great.
Yeah, let me share something here on the screen since we have some of the stuff up.
Yeah, that's great.
So Renee was talking about this. Can you guys see this diagram here?
No. Yes.
So this is guidelines on buffered bike lanes. So here you can kind of see how they have a different way, couple ways of doing them. They have parked cars, and then they have bike lanes. And I kind of like Susan. Was it your suggestion to put the swap the order of those to have the cars blocking you from traffic?
No, I think it was Dave, but anyway, have something.
So this goes over just a few things, and I think some of the suggestions in here make a lot of sense here.
Justin, what document is this?
This is NACDO. I can forward this to you guys. Renee was talking about this the other day. They refer to this in the plan. I think this is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. This is a little diagram that kind of covers recommended width and so on. So for example, these bike lanes, I see they're typically recommended to be 5 to 6 feet wide. I saw another mention on here that if you have a railing or a curb, you typically want a larger bike lane. I think they said next to a railing, they'd like an 8-foot bike lane. So if we were to follow that on the bridges over the canal where they have railings, an 8-foot sidewalk or something like that sounds like a nice thing that might actually work for both bicyclists and pedestrians. Anyway, I could forward this around if you guys want to look at this. We can discuss it more in the future. I just thought it's kind of nice to kind of visualize what some of these things can look like. They had another one that shows conventional bike lanes.
I do, just in that prior one, and this one too, this picture's fine. I think, Susan, you'd referenced it, but the idea of a car door opening up and with a bicycle running into it, it makes me nervous.
Right.
I don't know if you could almost do, if you go back to the prior image, it appears as though on the left side illustration, there was 2 double lanes. To me, that feels more compelling than the right side, simply because you get that extra lane where the car door can open up, and you know, as a bicyclist, you're going to be farther away from it.
Yeah, so that makes sense to me. That looks like the safest thing, but also looks like the most asphalt that you need.
Yeah, yes, I agree. It would be interesting if you could paint, you know, perhaps a green stripe down the middle of the double white between the bike and the driving car, something that gives it a little bit more color rather than the diagonal hashes on the right. But I like the idea of breaking it up a little bit rather than being just a monotone parallel stripage. Anyway, either way, having a bike lane somewhere is going to be better than having a bike lane nowhere. But if we have input as to what we get, I think that would be great.
Yeah,
anytime you're passing a parked car, it'd be nice to have a little bit more space where they're expected to park tighter to the curb and don't open their doors so wildly.
Right, yeah, well, maybe we were talking about maybe connecting the bicycle boulevard, at least for the short sections of Main Streets to or to connect Lincoln and Locust. If anyone wants to go and take a look at those sections, see, is there some kind of mechanism that where it can remove parking spots or something like that, where it can actually put a substantial bike lane, so that would be easy for bicycles to traverse.
Yeah.
That's something to consider. I'll forward these documents around to you offline.
And Justin, they did steal an image on page 79 of the active transportation plan. On page 79, they do illustrate a floating parked car with a bike lane to the inside. And I think there's some value to that. In fact, I would very much prefer that approach to any one of the pictures we just looked at.
Mhm.
I like the floating parked car idea with a bike lane to the inside. I think as a family, I would be more likely to use that for sure.
Okay, so you like that idea for like Main Street. Again, they're citing NACTO here, which is their website has a bunch of information on it for bicycle recommendations. It kind of makes sense that someone's figured out what the geometry of these things should be and has guidance for how to implement it.
Yeah. And therein lies the challenge too, and anywhere we do have parked cars on our roadways, to what extent do we have the space for? And if not, then what do I prefer different? And maybe it's a little bit narrower bike lanes still to the inside, or maybe it's just marked on the main road. But again, I have to kind of refer to the experts on this. But I'm glad they're moving forward with something.
All right, here's something else I wanted to show you. This is a drainage grate. When you have those narrow bicycle lanes, I'm sure everyone has opinions on the drainage grate. While they may not suck your tires in and cause you to fall over, no one wants to ride across them in general. They usually got big dips and so on. If you're not looking and you ride over one, it's a big jolt. It would seem to make sense if all of our streets that are narrower, if we could convert to a drainage grate more like this, that would create a lot more usable space to actually ride on the side of the road.
Agreed.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to stop. I'll email these around. I'll stop sharing my screen because I don't have anything more to discuss about. I can see you guys again. So continuing on, so we talked a bit about the physical construction of the page 86. We have a map of mostly the town.
What's the heading on that page?
It says bicycle facility recommendations.
Thank you. Pages got all mixed up.
And it's a colored map. You want? I could pull this up and share it if you wanted.
This is a non sequitur, but has anybody seen any comments in here. I did not, about creating occasionally some more curbs where the street sweepers can go and clean these new shoulders where bicycles are going to be traveling. Because I don't know how many village roads might have challenges with like leaf and debris that go off into the shoulder but don't get necessarily swept or cleaned. I don't know if that's a problem or not. I haven't come across it per se, but I just kind of thought about it.
I think I saw it mentioned in here that people had complained about debris on the side of the road. I've often heard road bikers in particular don't like that. They're narrow tires. Mountain bikers have bigger tires and they might bother, the difference might bother them a little less.
Is it necessary to add some curbs within the village to allow for street sweepers to pick up that debris more regularly, and therefore you don't have the debris that road bikers come upon?
I don't think you need curbs to do that. The street sweepers come down my street and I have no curbs.
Okay. All right, so that's
Dave, what street are you on, by the way?
South Main.
You're on South Main, okay.
Yeah, so, okay, good deal, that's it.
So I guess my comment would be, again, on some of this road network, instead of relying on shoulders, particularly on these large roads with fast cars and so on, would be to have like a full buffered bike lane there, where it's a substantial bike lane and there's a bit of a buffer between you and traffic. That would seem to make sense. But Dave, would you ever ride with your kids to Minden Ponds Park?
Well, yes and no. If the road was clearly indicated as a bike road with maybe different colored markings or more aggressively marked, I would consider it when they're older, not at this age, no way. But I was just thinking too, as an adult, if I'm riding through a village, I may want to just bike through and power through the center of it, right? And I might stop for a cup of coffee or somewhere along the way, or something to drink along the way. But I would like to have, for sure, the main thoroughfares still be heavily marked for bike traffic, even if we are creating the boulevards for people to get away from the main drag. So I guess that whole boulevard, what do they call it? The bike boulevards within the village. I'm okay with that as long as they're not stealing from the bike painting on the main roads as well. It'd be nice to make sure we try to do both. And right now, it looks like in the village anyway, on this map, it says that the main roads are going to be what's called shared lane markings. And I don't know, I guess that means it's the picture of the bike on the same road that the car's traveling, instead of a separately noted channel for the bike. And I don't know, maybe that's already what I'm doing, so I don't really care that much, but having a dedicated lane, if at all possible, on the main roads would be nice. And the reason I say this is because anybody coming in from the surrounding communities or even within the town of the village is probably going to be a decent biker. And they're not going to need the boulevards to kind of edge around the main roads, because they just came in on Jefferson, or they just came in on, South, or they came from Minden Ponds Park, or they came from Victor or whatever, and they're biking. So if anybody's coming from outside, I think in the village, you're going to want to make sure that you're not saying, hey, once you get to the village, you got to use the back road network, right? You want to try to give them the best service you can as a bicyclist to want to come into the village. And that means painting your main roads still with your channels of bike lanes and boulevards to the extent you can. So I just wouldn't give up one to get the other. Yeah, because look at this map, and this map is kind of what gave me the idea. But you have all these main roads that they're talking about adding or widening paved shoulders and diets and all this stuff, and then you hit up into the village, and you got these little boulevards that are sort of disconnected from all the main roads that people are coming in on, Maybe that's fine and it's intentional and it works, but if I'm coming in from outside by any distance, I'm not going to go take a back road to get down to Shane Place. I'm just going to stay on South and stay on South Main, go to North Main, cross over, and I'm going to expect the same service I had in the town. So yeah, I just want to be very careful to not pay enough attention to Jefferson, Monroe, and Maine.
Yeah, that's a good point there, that basically it's different levels of treatment. Once you hit the village, it's going to be completely different. One of the guidelines I was looking at when selecting the markings and lane design and so on for bicycles is to figure out who your end user is. And as Dave, you had mentioned, if for the so-called fearless people that are the road bikers that are riding, 100-something miles a week, they're used to dealing with all kinds of stuff, but people that are biking with their families, they're not. And what your serious fearless biker can handle is quite different than what a typical commuter or family rider, recreational rider might be willing to handle. That's not the, not the biking animal.
Yeah, and I think we want to cater to both, really. And
yeah, I would agree. So when selecting this, choosing who your end user is, and my look at this map of the network is it's more towards the fearless road riders, and it's not being designed more towards the family-oriented riders that want a little more safety.
Yes, and or even try to connect the boulevards. Like on this map, you see Sunset Boulevard and that kind of jagged area coming off of Toby. But then there's this disconnect on Jefferson where that bike boulevard on Sunset, you don't have a dash line coming across the sidewalk, right? Because they don't want to muck up Jefferson Road. But if you connected it to make it look like it was contiguous, so those blue boulevards sort of interconnect rather than being separate, even if it's just painting a little bit more aggressively on the sidewalk to get from that Sunset Boulevard to the Sutherland Boulevard on the sidewalk of Jefferson, that'd be nice. Or like Knickerbocker, I mean, Knickerbocker comes down pretty well north to south on that straight parallel and then just kind of dies. I don't know, I guess to your point, Justin, there's two users here, and you just want to make sure that you're allowing for as much connectivity between both types of transportation and not expecting one person who's a fast rider to all of a sudden become a slow rider, or not have the right of way as much as we'd like them to be having it in the village. But again, I preface all these comments by saying I'm thrilled that we're even undertaking this, and I think it's a lot of effort and work that's, moving us in the right direction. But
yeah, that was Renee's comment last week. Is it perfect? No, but it's wonderful they're talking about it. I have a little bit of a opinion on that after seeing what they did in Henrietta, which is thinking about it. If it's unsafe, doesn't do any good. If people aren't going to use it, it's not going to do any good. So putting a 2-foot wide or 3-foot wide bike lane on a 45-mile-an-hour road, it just
nobody cares. Yeah, I agree. Well, to that end, they haven't even tried to do anything on Jefferson, and maybe that's completely intentional.
okay. All right, well, it's a good discussion. Any other thoughts on this map? I know a lot of our comments now are, we can forward them along. We were asked more to look at the village section, but I really appreciate this. I've heard some good comments on the town section as well. So we can make some comments on it. Obviously, it won't be relevant to the LWRP review, but where we have ideas, it makes sense to share, in my opinion.
The State Street Bridge and the North Main Bridge, are they wide enough to put some sort of boulevard or dedicated bike lane that's clearly marked? Or with the sidewalks that are there now, do we just simply expect bicyclists, if they're not going to assume the road, to go up on the sidewalk? And there's not a lot of space there.
Yeah, that's why I was talking earlier about maybe an 8-foot wide sidewalk would give a lot more space. And that actually seems to be supported by the recommendations of NACDO, where if you have a railing or a curb, you want bike lanes to be 8 feet wide. And
so what are they planning to do when the State Street Bridge gets redone?
so, I mean, we need to follow up with this. What I've heard is DOT is looking at those sidewalks going across the bridge, but they were looking from it from a DOT concern, not a pedestrian safety or bicycle safety concern. They're looking at it, how can we make it easier to maintain the railings? So they were designing the sidewalk for railing maintenance rather than designing the sidewalk for pedestrians or bicyclists. And I know on the North Main Street Bridge in particular, that's people from Shane Place just trying to go down to Yotality or something like that, or walking across there. That people have strollers, and I've heard oftentimes that's just way too narrow on that sidewalk.
Yeah.
So anything we can do to really widen that would be a huge advantage.
I try to, so that sidewalk in particular, when I go across with my kids, I still try to keep my daughter to my inside so that I'm on the outside so she doesn't veer and accidentally go onto the road. It is ridiculously narrow to be able to do that safely. And yeah,
it's single file.
What's that?
It's single file.
Yeah, it scares me because I can't contain my daughter well enough to the inside, and so basically it's a walking bridge for our bikes unless I'm adventurous, and my daughter's a little bit klutzy, so so anyway, if we want to have a specific actionable idea that I think would be very useful for this plan, it would be to embed in 2 or 3 lines specifically dedicated to those bridges that we can go to the DOT with after this thing gets approved and say, oh, DOT, I know you're working on this new bridge and we're closing down, XYZ. This is in our master document. You have to pay attention to it, please, right? And here's what we want you to consider. And because they're projects in the near-term horizon, I think it'd be really compelling to try to have a little bit more specificity to those 2 bridges to connect us to our waterways. And I think that really plays into the LWRP as well, because 3/4 of our village is on the opposite side of where you connect to the waterway.
Yep. I mean, that North Main Street Bridge really needs widening. And it's even exacerbated because people walk both directions on the, I guess it's the eastern side of it really commonly, and then the western side is not used, but the eastern side is facing Shane Place, and that's where they're coming from. And then they're looking to go to, say, Yotality or some other business in the village. We want them to do that. We want that connection from our main street to the canal. So that seems to be vital ice cream commerce there.
Well, again, if there's anything that's potentially actionable that can affect immediate change on the horizon for those bridges, if we can get them to embed something in this document that speaks to those 2 bridges more specifically than I think is now, that would be nice.
I'm total agreement with you. It sounds like we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah, and also highlight the specific safety concerns that we had there. That's one that I've noticed too. It's really hard holding our dog on a leash without him going out in the street and getting clipped on that bridge.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a scary bridge.
When I was walking a dog across North Main Street Bridge, I have to carry the dog because it gets scared of the cars that are too close to it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a particular dog.
What is the Erie Canal towpath between Monroe Ave Bridge and State Street Bridge?
That goes over by the, isn't that the whole towpath that goes past DPW and then past Sheen Place?
Okay. It was just a segment that they're referencing some old code that I was pulling up. Never mind.
You're talking about that streetscape pedestrian enhancement?
No, it was they were referencing a code that said bicyclists aren't permitted on the sidewalks between those two locations. Okay, so then all right, that's the village component. All right, so right now, pedestrian recommendations, that's not really what we're talking about. All right, never mind. I'm just going through the ATP and trying to find everywhere they use the word bridge. See if they say anything specifically to biking. They talk a little bit about pedestrian space.
I know there was mentioned in there that people, like you said earlier, people are going on the sidewalks because they're, and definitely in places like the bridges because it's safer than the street. And I think in our other meeting, we talked about the center lane over the North Main Street Bridge being an ornamental feature that's perhaps not necessary. And then possibly just narrowing the road. Because you can't turn left, obviously, into the canal from the center lane. Okay, any other thoughts on this? If anyone wants to think about this, and I guess we'll come up with our list of notes or suggestions. We can talk about some of these treatments some more, but I'm in total agreement with Dave on these bridges are quite critical. We need to try to make them work for as many different uses as possible.
And Justin, you alluded to it earlier, but it is the connectivity, and I don't know this right now. If you're coming from Wegmans down Monroe and you want to get onto the canal path, can you go to the right and get down onto the canal path and under, or do you have to cross over to the left and get down that way? I know there's a uphand. I know there's a ramp up on the what would be northeast of Monroe, but what about on the southwest side of Monroe? Is there an entrance to the canal path there, or do you got to go farther?
Yeah, there is. If you're coming from Wegmans and you're coming towards the village, if you go down the little streets there into, there's a little road that takes you down to the town sewer plant.
Yep.
And it'll take you right to the canal.
Is it marked well? So for example, if you're a bicyclist coming into the community, do we want to redirect people and say, Village of Pittsford bicyclists this way, and it pushes them down onto the canal and then takes them up, by Del Monte and then up the North Main Bridge? Or do we want them to just come in straight off of Main Street or straight off of Monroe, like just straight through Sutherland, keep going, that type of thing?
I think that makes sense to mark things. So
maybe just markers, right? You don't have to have a preference. You could just mark them like to Shane Place this way, or to the village this way or something. I don't know.
Well, there's also the road that we didn't authorize from the Sutherland Service Center that goes down to the Canalway Path too.
Didn't know one existed.
The service entrance.
I'm trying to think what the name of that street is. It's like Wood something.
It's either Woodland. It's Woodland, but then there's Brook Road right there too.
Now, I'm reminded of something else. I took some seminar once that talked about the Erie Canal, And something that I think is completely missing from this, they were advocating the commercial vitality of the canal. And in this seminar, what they said was every person on the canal is 25 bucks. That's about what they spend on their trip, whether it's stopping for gas to get there, whether it's stopping for pizza along the way, getting a milkshake. Now, I'd be broke if if it cost me 25 bucks to go down the canal every time I did it. But the point is that there's major commerce that's doing it. And Governor Cuomo is, what are they putting in, like 200 million into that whole corridor to try to make it a viable corridor across New York State, and bicycle tourism and all that. But while we're on the topic of signs, how about we put wayfinding signs directing them to our library, directing people towards our village center, things like that. That seems like that would make sense, directing people towards restaurants, hotels.
Or just historic places.
Historic places.
Yeah, I think some sort of wayfinding makes sense, and I think that can be done with the color coordination, with some signs on the periphery of the village, maybe even right on Shane Place, you know, go here, go there. But I don't want to be inundated so much with signs, but I think some sort of wayfinding makes sense.
That was also part of the comp plan.
Yeah, it talks about kiosks, you know, that can be pretty attractive and very informative.
Good memory there. I don't remember what it said, but the comp plan recommends some of these, some signage along those lines.
Yeah, a lot of wayfinding and, yeah.
And then that whole public restroom at Shane Place, maybe we'll get that some year. Okay.
They do, this is just a quick note on, this is the active transportation plan, page 59. Susan, it might be hard to get to, but they do reference the North Main Bridge. And one of the little notes, number 5, it says, provide buffer space between sidewalk and travel lanes. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I know what it means, but I don't know really how it helps per se. I guess is the cars driving across that bridge right now, there's no space between that and the sidewalk, so they can just get as close to the sidewalk as they want. Mm-hmm. I would rather just push the sidewalk out. So yeah.
So this is the section that was just comments from the public and observations.
Okay, thank you. Now I understand.
So I think that's different than the recommendations.
Okay, very good. Thanks. Yeah. But I think in many respects, the State Street Bridge probably has me more worried than anything, because it's going to be done real soon. And if we don't have some effect on it, and maybe the ATP can, if they're a little bit more strongly worded in their guidance or recommendations.
If they make recommendations, you mean?
Yeah,
in their recommendations?
Yeah, maybe they're prescriptive in what they want. And obviously we can't change it per se, but if we're prescriptive, maybe the DOT will be more likely to listen.
Yeah, no, that was my point at the very beginning. A lot of their recommendations are to consider or maintain, and that hardly seems like a recommendation to me. You know, if I were the DOT, I would say, you know, this is the preliminary study. You know, not something that is prescriptive at all, or, you know, that has any real guidance to hang your hat on. So, but I've been Anyway,
I've heard from Mayor Corby, he says planners like to have very soft, passive language rather than what you actually see in a typical. So if they write laws, that often reflects the soft, passive language. Instead of thou shalt do that, it might say thou should do this, pretty please.
I think that's a total, that's so missing the point. A recommendation should just be something that, as the result of thought and discussion, this is what we think should happen. Anyway.
Yeah, well, hey.
We're all in agreement with you, Susan.
Yeah, there's no reason not to go back to them and say, hey, we recommend adding language that better dictates the way the State Street Bridge restructuring and rebuild leads to safer bicycle and pedestrian traffic, whereas, yeah, that's a primary concern. It's not currently included in this document. Something like that. And maybe they can come up with something. I guess, we're not on the board to write the language, but if it's not in here, where else does it go? And if it doesn't go anywhere else, then does the DOT do what they want? Because we don't have any foundational statements to the contrary.
Right.
I mean, I would give up 5 pages of this document to put in one about the State Street Bridge, because that's right on the horizon and they're going to be looking to us for guidance, and we don't really give them any.
Yeah, I'm curious to find out what they're actually doing with that. Maybe we can have a discussion with Renee to find things out. She's very much on top of a lot of that. Mayor Corby is as well.
Right. And the other comment too is if we put it in the ATP, then we can, as a community, hold the trustees up to the fire, so to speak, if they don't support the guidance that's been recommended in the ATP for that particular, bridge. So basically saying, hey, look, it's in there, go to bat, go do something about it. That's, kind of why you're there. And I think, they all mean well to try to accomplish that. And I think this is something everybody could get behind. Because right now, again, so much of the village is on the wrong side of Shane Place where you connect to it. And this plan does not easily show us how to get there. And so when the LWRP comes up, and one of the questions is how do you utilize your waterways given this document? Are we going to pass it?
Right. Good question.
That's a good question. We'll have to talk about what to do about that. And yeah.
Look, I love everything that they're trying to do in this document, but the LWRP is saying, how do you connect to the waterways? And are you maximizing the utilization of it? Not really.
So I think it could be better. I think that's been yeah.
And some of the things that are easily able to be done is put pressure on the DOT to fix these 2 bridges, because it's currently the only way, or Monroe, to get to the water. So if you don't address those 3 bridges in this document, and all 3 of those bridges are in the village, and you don't address how to get across those 3 bridges safer as a pedestrian, or in particular as a bicyclist, then how do you really meet the LWRP standards? I just want to be careful to be too aggressive on that statement, and I don't know, I'm new to this, but it feels like, it's the one thing that's missing, and it's one of the things the LWRP asks you to do.
Good comments, Dave.
Sorry about that. Ringing.
Are you bicycling now?
No.
Okay. So moving on, there's not too many pages left. The next section was on policy and regulatory recommendations, page 89. And I wanted to jump in with this section on off-street parking because I don't know what happened with this. But first of all, it cites the wrong section of code. And in here, they say, hey, village should scale back on off-street parking requirements. This is the last sentence under off-street parking. So instead of having 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of ground floor area, go down to 2 to 3. And the drafts of code said that, and then at the 11th hour, someone changed it from 3 back to 5 to require way more parking. So I don't really know how that happened, because when they're working on the zoning code for parking, the consultants recommended 3. I think we sent comments to them, said that sounded like a great idea. We don't want giant parking lots. We want people to park and walk and so on. And somehow it still ended up being 5, I believe. I'm just mentioning that as that's a point I think would make sense to bring up as to why is it the way it is.
Justin, you're on page 89 under the off-street parking, right?
Correct.
This was the one part when I read through, I marked it really big saying yes. As in, I agree with the statement here in the active transportation plan.
Agreed. I just don't know why it wasn't with the code updates.
It was one of my more emotional like responses too when I read this, like finally type of thing.
Yeah, the other thing is right there under bike parking of adding bike racks. I kind of was like, yes, let's make sure there's bike racks. I think some of that did make it into the code, but I haven't looked at code recently.
Right. Well, do we as a board want to reinforce our strong sentiments toward the comments in the ATP about the off-street parking, just as a reinforcement that we agree that this should be done?
I think so, and I think maybe we should mention that there seems to have been possibly a mistake in the published, or the adopted or published version of code, because it had been agreed. We recommended 3, the consultants recommended 3, and this recommends 3. So why is it 5? Just kind of stressing that some urgency to fix it.
I agree. I don't know if it's appropriate for the ATP, but this speaks generally to code, which is you're going to get more foot traffic if you don't force everybody to park in front of the store that they're going to. So for example, Rachel's, I don't know if anybody's noticed, of course, they put out those outdoor umbrellas and those picnic tables. Wouldn't it have been wonderful if we let them put in a grassy little plaza there with picnic tables and umbrellas? And
that was heavily discussed.
And I know, and wouldn't it also be? It's also a little ironic that they're the one restaurant in town that's clearly ready for COVID well in advance by the way they designed their dining room. I mean, they're 6-foot distancing and they didn't have to remove any tables. They're already gone. And so I know maybe I'm speaking off the cuff to the ATP, but boy, I would like to see more people walking around who have to park a half a block away to go to where they want. And I don't know why we can't expand the Main Street shopping area to include Rachel's and the bakery, and it just seems stupid to force everybody to have parking spots.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
oh, yeah, agreed. I think some other things we discussed is, hey, that's about the best place in the entire Main Street area to put a band. If you want to have outdoor music right in front of Rachel's, it'd be perfect because it's facing the canal. The building will block all the sound from the residential areas.
Yeah.
And
look at the guy selling art this weekend. Wouldn't it be great if he didn't have to put that nice little art display on top of blacktop? I mean, he's right on 4 corners. He doesn't need 4 spots to have a gallery, or 5 spots or whatever it is. I mean, he probably doesn't by code. So in his case, he probably doesn't. But it sure would be nice if, you know, some of these locations could create outdoor venues in the village in the ways that we don't have right now. And, you know, think about the bakery area. you know, maybe there's some requirement for a little bit of parking, but imagine if they grassed that over and shared space with Rachel's and created some, you know, harmony, and it'd be a really attractive place to go.
Well, with you. I'm going back to a comment from the comp plan I heard from somebody, a resident, is bring the fun back to Main Street. So outdoor dining, music, some vitality instead of everyone sitting inside. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, it might take a little while for that to be okay, but I agree with you.
well, yeah. And then the problem with Rachel's is it takes money to transform that space, and the tenants don't have it.
Right.
So anyway, so I was one of those comments on the bike parking and off-street parking under the regulatory regulations on page 89. The rest of this, I didn't have too many real comments on, other than I noted on page 91, it's something about bus shelters, and I don't recall ever seeing a bus shelter in the village.
I haven't either, but if we do bus shelters, I think I'd like to do them with a little bit of flair, not a standard bus shelter, if we can somehow support.
A nice little Queen Anne bus shelter.
I don't care, something like a series of umbrellas under chairs or over chair. I don't know, just something that's pretty. Costs money, but whatever. I don't know. Maybe we get the bus traffic up first before we start doing the bus shelters. I don't think that's a cart before the horse type thing. I really would, though. Maybe someone can comment on this that knows better than I. How do you feel generally about this plan's ability to connect St. John Fisher and Nazareth to the village?
I don't think it does. I think people have to ride on the sidewalk.
And is there any way for this plan to encourage that more?
Well, what we heard from Renee was that they're making a bicycle or a bus route that'll go from St. John Fisher. And if I was a bicycle rider and I could take a bus, well, I didn't have to wait an hour. That might be convenient. But I mean, that was we discussed this a little bit at a prior meeting, is what are poor students going to do that don't have a car?
Right. Yeah, I mean, if there was any community that those two colleges should want to escape to have a place to study, to have a place to just get away from the college campus, and not have it be just to go to Thirsties or just to Starbucks, but to have a location. Yeah, I know a lot of the folks are going to go into the city, but you gotta believe that there's some ability to pick up that foot traffic or that bike traffic.
Look at the dairy. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Well, something else they could do is, I know the town is working on, they're working on that little trail connecting into the Auburn Trail. And then there's been some discussion of over there on 3750 Monroe, which is just that not so beautiful complex right as you go on the other side of the bridge. Maybe instead of the path being along the main streets to get from the village there, maybe it goes through the woods.
What road again is that?
So basically, this is getting into another thing. This is the whole northwest quadrant region.
Oh, yeah.
So yep. There by the DPW, there's the Auburn Trail. I believe the Auburn Trail goes right down to French Road.
Yep.
And goes past, I think it goes past parts of Nazareth. But anyway, so if we can't get good bike lanes on Monroe Avenue, the comment is Are there options for good bike routes that might go through some of that woods and area back there?
It's very possible that that existing trail, if it's advertised correctly, you know, kind of the Nazareth kids could maybe connect across that French Road, get to that trail, and maybe once they put in the that Northwest Quadrant trail, you know, maybe it's a little easier to get down here without hitting the main road. But again, if I was in college, I just want to get on my bike and power through the roads as fast as I can to get to where I want to go. I'd probably just want to get on the main road. And if we could encourage the town to put, I don't know what it looks like right now, but if we could encourage the town to put nice dedicated bike lanes coming from St. John Fisher or Nazareth into the village, that would be nice. I got to look and see if that's already there on East Ave. Maybe it's there. No recommend. So right now there's no recommended improvement for East Avenue.
Yeah, on page 91, it talks about upgrading the public infrastructure, upgrades and enhancements, and how they should put bike lanes, wide shoulders, sharrows, bus shelters. They're talking about coming from St. John Fisher and.
Oh, good deal. Okay,
But
good.
it is marked in purple for no recommended improvement. Is that a mismarking on that part of East?
Okay, let's make a note there that conflicts with page 91, conflicts with page 86.
Wait. Justin, you were cutting out. You're talking away from your mic.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
So page 91 conflicts with page 86. 86 had what the markings that they wanted to do, what the improvements they wanted to do to the major roads. And then page 91 says, well, you need to do more. And the other page 86 says, that's fine.
Is 91, is the heading bicycle commuting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so what happens here is if you look at St. John Fisher and Naz, you either have road diet candidate or no recommended improvement in the roads. So effectively we're saying we're going to leave the whole infrastructure alone. And then, Joanne, to your point down below, it says the proximity of various destinations throughout the village and town make commuting by bicycle a viable option. However, upgrades to public infrastructure and enhancements to private developments will be necessary to maximize community opportunities. And they consist of, and then they mention wider shoulders, sharrows, bike boulevards, trails, right. But none of that applies to St. John Fisher and Nazareth, even though they're included in the paragraph. So either be honest, take it out, St. John Fisher and Nazareth of that paragraph, or consider at a minimum East Ave to be a candidate for a road diet.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, getting people from the universities and the schools into the village and to the other popular destinations would be almost probably number 2 to fixing the bridges to me.
I agree with that. But also let's talk, village wanting to have a wider disparity of housing. One of the things that we may find ourselves with is an opportunity to encourage students, potentially graduate students, to live here. And how better else than to make it easier to get to school? And I don't see why any Nazareth kid would want to live anywhere else but the village. Obviously, I live here, so I'm jaded. But the idea being that it's a great community to commute to if you're at Nazareth or St. John Fisher, and we may have a wider spread of housing options in the future. Whether or not something comes down on 75 Monroe or anywhere else.
Yeah, I'll have to ask my stepdaughter, who worked at Nazareth for a number of years and lived in the village, if she ever actually walked or rode her bike there. I think the answer is no.
Yeah, and why? If we could do anything, just like get to Nazareth, let alone St. John Fisher. But the fact that they're not even slating that road for improvement doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
Unless they already think it's really good. maybe that's their comment. They think it's already really good. I've never rode up East Ave, so I can't tell you if it's a really easy road to ride on with a bike already. But again, I do think this goes back to the town-wide idea of, if you're going to show dedicated roadways for bikes, have some sort of painting and striping system that making sure cars know, hey, this is important that you're here, and we're going to make sure that we put a little time and attention to you being safe. And that includes painting the roads or double marking lanes or something. And right now, I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're looking at that road and saying it's a big enough shoulder, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, they just redid East Avenue, right? And made it from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, 4
Yes.
lanes to 2 lanes.
Right.
That's correct.
And they put a big wide center turn lane there, and they did not put adequately wide bike lanes on there.
Right.
And I know Renee was not happy about that, and she was working with DOT on that, and they wanted their extra wide car lanes and didn't want to do the wider bike lanes.
And so I just feel bad in these little areas where, if this is going to be the master plan that's got big picture views and goals and objectives, you want to be able to reflect on it when things are going to get done and improved. And those bridges, to your point, Justin, I think are number 1. And number 2, 3, and 4, I don't know if they're interchangeable, would be things like being a little bit more direct with Nazareth and St. John Fisher, maybe having a little bit clearer directional connectivity between where you're going from point A to point B within the town or around the village, and then trying to understand, to your point, dedicated riders and what type of rider are they? Are they going to be a fast rider through the main roads, or are they going to be a family through the back roads, and try to connect them a little bit better, particularly
Yeah,
to towns.
I think to your point also, Dave, on page 49, which is the town and village assessments, they start out by talking about St. John Fisher and Nazareth, and then they ignore that accessibility to the village with the bike lane. So that's supported elsewhere, and then they kind of drop the ball, it seems.
Yeah, well, it seems to me that some of the main objectives of this document weren't met, which is namely connectivity to schools, done a lot better.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, so where were we? We were on page 91. I heard a lot of great comments.
Justin V, do you mind me backing up just a bit and asking Justin L a question? What are you going to do when your kids are going to go to middle school and they got to ride out to Thornell? Are you going to let them bike? Because where are we with that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a dangerous ride right now, so
Yeah.
Probably not.
No,
I mean, it would be pretty
I
unsafe.
probably won't, but wouldn't it be nice if we could?
Certainly, yeah.
So I don't know, I don't know if ever we would get that far, letting middle school kids ride a mile away or whatever, but boy, I wish.
Oh, there's another comment about that.
I'd sooner let my kid bike to Fairport in middle school than bike to Thornell Road or whatever middle school. All right, so page 91, sorry.
What does 92 look like at the top?
That's the balance between emergency vehicles and friendly streets.
Okay.
And complete streets policy for the town. Supposedly, the town doesn't have one for the addendum. And, but I think the point of the complete streets policy was that roads should be designed for pedestrians, bicycles, and cars, with not a clear car-oriented dominance. And that's just not our case. our roads are designed for cars and only cars for the most part. We do have sidewalks now, so pedestrian support has been improving significantly, but bicycles not so much.
Justin, the audio is getting funny. I
My
don't know
audio
why.
is getting funny.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
breaking
maybe I
up.
should. I can't face the computer and read my document at the same time, I guess. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the complete streets resolution that the village passed was in 2011, and I've got that pulled up here as well, and that's pretty much what you said.
I think DOT has other ideas, but I don't really know how that works. The appendix, I haven't seen a copy of the appendix yet for this document.
Now, interestingly, the village complete streets resolution is, the PDF is on the DOT website. So the DOT is required to file that.
Let me back up and ask a question. Are you suggesting that because we have a complete streets policy that when the State Street Bridge is put in place, they have to follow it?
They've got to have it on file.
No, this is also state law, is that I was looking at some of the laws for things, and they said streets do need to consider to be designed for bicycles and other modes of transportation other than cars. So I think that a lot of this is not taken seriously enough by DOT sometimes, or maybe has been in the past. I don't know how we get our streets to be designed for bicycles. That would obviously cost money if you got to make a road wider, and particularly a bridge wider.
That doesn't cost the village any money to fix the state road, right? That bridge, that's the state's project, right?
It's the state's project,
But they
and
have
maybe
to
it's just a
follow-
matter.
Well, maybe we just reinforce in our comments again back to the board the necessity to reference projects that are looming and the necessity to incorporate the complete streets policy that's been adopted by the village. I mean, is that enough to kind of bullywhip them a little bit?
Well, the LWRP is also mandated on state agencies, and a lot of this is in the LWRP as well. I think they should probably be submitting an application to us for an LWRP review if they're reorienting the main streets, and I think they're going to fight us to death and say they're not going to apply to any village boards for reconfiguring the streets. I asked that question a while back, and it depends on whether it's a type 1 action in seeker or it's a type 2 in action. So do you consider it maintenance, or do you consider it reconfiguration of a road?
Well, herein lies the problem. If we anticipate, or if we expect a reconfiguration of the road to incorporate the complete streets policy and the ATP, then it would be a reconfiguration, though to the better. And so we would expect to have potentially an LWRP or seeker, right? And
yeah.
if we just let them build it the way it is right now, which is crap, then it's level 1 or whatever and doesn't have to go through that process.
So I'll just give you a reminder what the town had to do. The town was trying to block the clear cutting of the trees along the Erie Canal, and they actually had to sue the Canal Corporation, or that I think was doing it, to say this is not a type 2 action in seeker. You're cutting down hundreds of acres of trees, and it clearly calls in the seeker handbook that if you're cutting down 10 acres or more in trees, that's not maintenance. That's listed as a landscaping action subject to a seeker review. Mm-hmm. So they took them to court for misclassification of the environmental review and won. But obviously, we don't have much leverage with state agencies, so we can have our opinions, but unless someone wants to take them to court, the state's going to do what they want to do for the most part. They might talk to us a little bit.
Right. And to go back to that with these bridges, if they simply replace the design style it is now with challenging transportation for bikes and pedestrians at the same time, then that would just be maintenance. And it wouldn't be a secret review, right?
If they leave the, that would be a question for Mindy, is when does it transition from maintenance to a new design? And I'm sure there's lots of case law in that.
All right, because that's kind of the tough part. If one of our big concerns of these bridges, and the reality is they're just going to put it through as a class 2 and as a maintenance item, how are we ever going to get improvements? But if we ask for improvements and they do them, and then we say, okay, thanks for all these improvements, now you're going to have to go through the village for a review, you're going to say, oh, never mind, we'll just go back to the way we were.
Yeah, I hear your point. That's an interesting point. To make it, so I guess is if they're being nice, maybe you be nice in return. If they're not, you look into what leverage you can get.
Because you got to get, but again, if you try to get leverage in any way, then they'll just fall back to doing nothing and calling it maintenance.
Wow. Anyway, interesting point. I don't know the politics of working with DOT. I'm sure it's. Okay. I'm sure I speculate we don't have a whole lot of leverage typically.
Well, it's nice to see anyway the complete streets policy embedded in here for the village as a way to potentially, connect it better to the bridges in particular.
Yeah, another note I had is in a section they talk about complete streets, and the other one is emergency services. They mentioned that there's a lot of discussions with that. I would kind of like to have it written in this document. What are the key concerns of emergency services? Because this comes up a lot. And I think this has been known from all these discussions. So incorporating that into the document, I think would be valuable for somebody.
Yeah.
My note on the next section, by the way, I think I had a big comment that just called it fluff. Maybe that's not a ideal term, but it's just a.
Yep. I agree.
So that's the whole section on creating a pedestrian and bicycle safety culture, the next paradigm shift for Pittsburgh. Sorry, Pittsburgh. I mean, it seems like nice stuff in here, but I don't really have any comments on much of it. I don't know if anyone else did.
No, it's pretty boilerplate to me.
Yeah. Exactly.
My one thing I did comment on is on the page, bottom of page 93, under that State Street Pittsford image. They talk about the traditional 3 E's approach of education, engineering, and enforcement. And they say the village has been doing that, and I was kind of like, not so much. We don't have engineering. Nothing's designed for pedestrians. Enforcement is non-existent. No one's doing speed enforcement. So that was my only comment on this whole section. Any other thoughts on these sections? Comments? We've got a lot of good comments from the discussion today. Thank you, everybody.
I just posted a link while you were chatting about the boilerplate stuff. This is a direct link to the 2001 or 2011 Complete Streets Act that was signed into law. And what's interesting about it is it specifically says consideration of complete street design for all state, county, and local transportation projects that are undertaken by the department or receive both federal and state funding are subject to the Department of Transportation oversight. They shall consider the convenient access and mobility on the road network by all users of all ages, including pedestrians, bicyclists, public transportation. So it seems to go on a little bit, and they talk about some stuff. And what it suggests is maybe in that first bit that just anything undertaken is then subject to this policy. And that would suggest that it doesn't have to depend upon being a class 1 or class 2. It's just a project that's undertaken, and as a result, they have to consider it. And some of those things are lane striping, bicycle lanes, road diets, right? All the things that we're kind of talking about here. So maybe we can just try to get powers that be to try to hold the DOT to the fire a little bit.
It seems like it's better than having nothing. I just don't really, my impression of reading that is that it doesn't have the same teeth that LWRP does in terms of being binding at higher level agencies, but it's worth a shot.
Well, I agree with you, Justin. The problem is, to Justin Litch's point, if they consider it to be a maintenance action, then it doesn't classify as an LWRP, in which case we'd have to sue them in order to get it classified accordingly.
Yeah, so by the way, I'm pulling this, I have New York State's DOT bicycle design guidelines pulled up here. It says the same thing. When designing highway projects, it is essential to consider physical improvements for bicycles, just as it is for vehicles in the traffic mix. All state highways should be designed and constructed to safely accommodate known and anticipated bike traffic.
Well, I would clip that, save it, and put it in our comments.
Right.
I mean, between that and this, I mean, we effectively have laws that require the DOT to make that bridge, to make the bridge in a way that the ATP can say we expect connectivity.
So we can work on some, I guess, strongly worded comments on these bridges. Well, I think we have a few things to pull from.
And if they want, I hate to voice my opinion too early, but I mean, if they're expecting us to look at the LWRP and address the primary questions of utilization, integration, and connectivity to our waterways, and they're expecting us to say, yeah, this is good enough, well, you better do a little bit more than just the bikes, right? I mean, you got to address the waterways, and right now there's very limited connectivity at all.
Right.
Right. Okay.
But again, I still like the document, but just.
Hey, well, this is just a tweak. Throw in a few things on fixing the bridges. That's not a big change.
Right, right. And draw some lines that connect these boulevards and connect them in a way that you expect the DOT to listen. So these little connectivity points of boulevards and across various parts of the towns, put one through the North Main Bridge, put one through the State Street Bridge, possibly put one through the Monroe Bridge, and expect it. May not happen, but it would be nice if you could safely bike across those without needing to be on the sidewalk. And I think that's at a minimum what the LWRP should expect.
Sure. Good comment. Speaking about that, let's talk about getting into this LWRP comments or review. Unless anyone has anything more to go over in this chunk of the document, the only other sections of the document I thought could be kind of relevant is what the goals are for the document. But I think we've kind of come along with some things that we really want to see addressed a little better. I think some really good ideas got put forward tonight. Next time we talk, I think it makes sense to start going through the LWRP document and see what that actually says about this and see what's actually in here, as Dave was saying.
Can you send that in advance, the LWRP blank sheet?
I think Linda sent it to everybody and offered to print it for everybody. This is like a 200-page document.
I got it.
I know Susan and Joanne, you guys have stuff from Mindy on the LWRP as well, correct?
Yeah, we do. It's
Oh.
not document, really.
No, I think the relevant sections are fairly minor.
Right.
And just as a refresher, my notes were LWRP Policy 1 and Policy 9 that we have to review were the key ones. Policy 9 was access to the canal. Policy 1 was efficient infrastructure, walkability, access, stuff like that.
You're in section 3.
I think it's section 3 in the LWRP. So our review standards, there's like the 12 policies. 1 and 9 are critical ones for this particular review.
Right. I also think section 4, page 16, and section 5, page 9 through 14, basically.
Section 4, page 16.
Yeah. And section 5, 9 through 14.
So is that the sections that talk about North Main Street, the Shane Place area, Bob Ford Field, and some of those other areas?
Yeah, I mean, transportation, traffic calming. I mean, it's, you know, my favorite document.
Yeah, so thank you for coming up with the page numbers there. So
I mean,
think, as you said, it's a fairly small section we got to go for, but there's good stuff in there.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
So I think it makes, or would that be a good topic to go through that at our next meeting? It would be my suggestion.
Sure.
And when would we like to meet again? Do you like to do next Monday?
Yeah, that's our, you know, MO.
Okay, what time? You want to do 6 o'clock again?
That's
fine.
not much to me.
Fine with me.
Okay, 6 o'clock works for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Linda will consider that a request for a meeting next Monday at 6 o'clock.
Okay, I'll put that as workshop type meeting, right?
Yep, it'll be a workshop.
And then our next regular meeting, August 17th, you want to have a public hearing, correct?
Correct.
Or, okay. All right, sure, I'll set those up.
And I may work on writing up some of the points that we've been identifying over through our discussions. And so after we look at the LWRP sections, maybe the subsequent meeting, we'll start going through our notes that we want to send to the town and village.
You know, New York City is in stage 4 now.
Wow.
Or phase 4, whatever. Any idea, Linda, when Village Hall, you know, can open up?
I don't know.
Can we change the policy that beer must be served at Village Hall so it's an essential business?
Beer?
Something like that. So it's a bar. We'll turn it into a bar and.
It sounds like it's a day-to-day thing, because the last meeting was supposed to be in the Village Hall, and then at the last minute it was a virtual meeting. So I don't think I can predict when that might happen. Maybe Dorothea has more information, or the mayor.
Linda, I'm okay with the 180-page LWRP that you sent, but do you happen to have the blank questionnaire that we have to fill out and
with the points? With the points?
Yeah, do you have a blank one of those that you could send around?
I'm sure I do. I can do that. Yeah.
I think I have a resolution template somewhere for that basically goes through all the, whatever, the 12 points. And when you say this does or does not comply because, and it's fill in the blank.
Yeah, that's the one.
I think we all memorized those at one point.
I've only done one, so I need
I
another
think we did that for the last time. We just filled in the blank in this resolution template for all the ones. I can forward that along.
Okay.
And just a question on the LWRP as I think about it in our time away. If it doesn't accomplish something, but it doesn't harm something, do we still pass it?
So it's a question of consistency. It's not prescriptive. It just requires consistency with policies. And if one policy, how many are there? 15 points. If one is not met, then it fails.
Okay.
And some can be not applicable.
Yep.
So, but it's right.
Okay.
All right, we'll get into that next time. Thank you for that advice, Susan. I wasn't sure if you previously considered it more of like a balancing test where you consider the 15 principles, and if one is not really met quite right, but in general it's good, that we go forward with it. But your thought is if one isn't quite right, we say no.
If one, if one is inconsistent, right, then it's determined to be inconsistent. But as you'll see, the checklist is, doesn't map directly to policies. So it's a challenging document.
We'll get to that discussion, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Soon
All right,
enough.
great. Shall I move to adjourn?
I'll second that.
It was Justin Lightgib?
No,
Nope,
David-
David Marshall made the motion,
David Marshall, and then just me.
and
Okay.
Mr. Leistra seconded it.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good night.
I,
As Justin would
Okay,
say, let the record show that we were all in favor.
Okay.
we all agreed to leave the meeting.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone. I heard a lot of great comments tonight. I really appreciate the good dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.
are we, not Justin V, but are we